Good morning. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss. And my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington. You know, just another crazy week in the news. Trump ratchets up the Strongman routine in the wake of an alleged assassination attempt. The Supreme Court guts the centerpiece achievement of the civil rights movement. The Hoosier State's primary election is just days away, and the feds break up a Northwest Indiana mob gambling ring. I've got a couple great guests to join me in talking about all of that and more. But first, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to hide important information behind a paywall in the middle of a political crisis, even if that is to our financial detriment. So please, if you find value in this work, and it is a lot of work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that is okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, forwarding our content to your people. You get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let's welcome this week's guest. First, a Democrat running for State House in District 81, returning to the show, it's Sharon White. Sharon, welcome.
Good morning. Glad to be back on this Sunday morning of primary week.
Glad to have you. Hoping to hear from you with a victory speech come Tuesday night.
Me too.
Fingers crossed, right? Also, let us welcome at this time a newcomer to this space, but no stranger to your social media feeds. It's songwriter, performer, filmmaker, installation artist, jack of all trades. Is there anything this man cannot do? It is Fred Miller. Fred, welcome.
What's up, y'all? That's a great intro. Thank you for listing all of the things that I do.
Fred, you go by MF Fred on your webpage and your social media feed. Does that stand for what I think it stands for?
Yes, it does stand for more fries. I would like more French fries at all times. How did you know?
You know what? They're terrible for us, but I'm guilty of loving them as well. So listen, a lot to dive into this week. So let's go ahead and jump right into the deep end. Oh, look, a cat. That's a different cat than we saw before we went live. How many of these things are you going to come crawling out of the woodwork Fred?
We have 3 today. This one will only leave me alone if I pick him up, and then he'll go away. He hates being picked up. So if not, you just be hearing meow, meow nonstop the whole rest of this time.
Very good. Listen, we live for a photo bomb by the cats, so hopefully we can get all 3 in at some point in the show. But let's go ahead and jump into this week's news, and we're going to start sort of where we only briefly mentioned this story last week due to incomplete information, though that didn't stop a whole lot of people from broadcasting their conclusions to the world. The White House Correspondents' dinner was interrupted last Saturday night by what we are going to call an attempted assassination. Cole Thomas Allen, 31 of Torrance, California, checked into the hotel as a guest, armed with a shotgun, a pistol, and 3 knives. He sprinted through a security checkpoint and apparently discharged his weapon. An officer went down with a chest wound, saved by his vest, though whether Allen's gun or friendly fire struck him is still an open question. And he was tackled before he got anywhere near the ballroom where Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, and like the entire line of succession were having dinner. He sent a manifesto to his family beforehand, calling Trump a pedophile, a rapist, and a traitor, and listed administration targets in priority order, with the notable omission of FBI Director Kash Patel, who I'm sure is devastated by the omission. Now, Allen had no prior criminal record. He's not cooperating with investigators, and the first charge alone carries a potential life sentence. Now, Within minutes of the attack, Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi, Mike Johnson, and the entire social media MAGAverse had all independently arrived at the exact same conclusion. Trump really needs his $400 million White House ballroom. Former MAGA influencer and Elon Musk baby mama Ashley St. Clair says the reaction was coordinated through group chats, including one called Fight, Fight, Fight. The same machine turned an innocuous Ben Stiller basketball post and AOC's condemnation of violence into pro-assassination messaging somehow. And on the other end of the political spectrum, by Sunday midday, 300,000 posts on X had declared the whole thing staged. This, despite hundreds of professional journalists reporting from the scene in real time. University of Maryland researcher Jen Golbeck suggests this is not unusual. Conspiracy theories thrive not despite available information, but because of it. The flood of contradictory real-time updates pushes people toward simplified narratives. And Emily Varaga, a professor at the University of Minnesota who studies political misinformation, said that sometimes more information is not necessarily better, especially in such polarized time when people can pick and choose the facts they like and assemble their own narrative puzzles, saying, quote, meaning doesn't have to be tied to reality. Sharon, what was your initial reaction to this thing last week? And I guess with the information that has come in since then, has it changed?
So my initial reaction, well, first, you and I were texting about my initial reaction pretty soon after it happened. But so I've seen some videos since, and one of the videos I have seen is that they were actually taking down the metal detectors, which just seems really interesting, that they were taking down the metal detectors while people were still in the ballroom. And my second take related to the need for a $400 million ballroom is that, you know, the thing is, this wasn't insecure. It was insecure because, at least based on things I've read, they didn't put security where it needed to be. This is also not a White House function. And because this is not a White House function, are they saying that if they want to have the White House Correspondents' Dinner, they will start having it at the actual White House? That seems like a kind of gross that seems like a way for journalism to start being more controlled by the White House than maybe it currently is. While at the same time, if they aren't going to allow it to happen at the White House, which I would argue that they shouldn't allow this at the White House, because again, separation of journalism and the people who are running the country, then that would mean that they'd be in the same place, because they've used the Hilton for decades for this particular event. So what's the argument here? We need to have a ballroom for an event that we're just never going to have at that ballroom? Doesn't make sense.
And Brett, what about you? What did you think when this thing first happened? And have you changed your mind since?
Oh man, I've worked for since I was a kid in big mega churches growing up around very intense security and fear and all of this stuff, and have done a lot of large events, festivals, music festivals, things like that. When I see something like this happen, I look at it as a security issue, that they have not done their job to understand where the entrances and exits are. I don't want to put myself on blast for breaking and entering in high school, but there was a lot of that when I was a kid. We'd see a door that was half open or cracked or didn't close all the way, someone left out of, and they put their shoe in the entrance so they can run out to their car, and that's very easy for anyone to sneak in. And I think
no breaking, that's just entering.
Yes, that's
well, and in this case, this guy didn't do either one of those things. He was a hotel guest that had checked in the day before, and his luggage was not checked, and his information, they weren't checking people that were checking in to the hotel. And for this event, I'm just surprised that they didn't shut it down for 24 to 48 hours beforehand, and then let all the journalists that were coming from out of town come stay on site, that type of thing. That was the part where I was this isn't even this is a security issue because we see them taking down the metal detectors, but it's also a security issue because they weren't prepared ahead of time.
Yeah, George Bush came to my elementary school when I was in high school, And I was like one of 5 people who didn't get to go because of security stuff, where they were just like, well, we have too many people here and this isn't going to happen. And, it was like for multiple days, the school was shut down until he showed up. And I'm like, there's no way that has changed. There's no way that they don't understand how security works. They have far more information. And I think there's probably somebody inside who is saying, we're not doing enough. We need to be doing more. And I don't know if they ran up against budget constraints or time or what it was, but I don't see this as like a solution for a ballroom.
What I suspect, Fred, is that as they've done with much of the rest of the government, that the Trump administration has taken the Secret Service and purged all of the competent people in favor of loyal people. And, you should not assign to malice what can be explained by incompetence. And I think what we have here is that, for all the folks who went on social media in the hours after this thing with no information, saying staged, like, you're doing more harm than good, I think, because if everything becomes a conspiracy, then nothing is a conspiracy. And the real ones wind up getting buried. Like, for example, we're not even talking about Epstein this week. Mission accomplished. Now, I guess I want to go ahead and turn to the fallout from this thing, which is, I think, of far more consequence than the event itself. And, like I said, I don't think this thing was staged, but Donald Trump is, above all else, a performer. And like any seasoned improv artist, he knows the first rule. Yes, and yes, there was an attempted attack, and that's why I need my $400 million ballroom. Yes, the press corps huddled in fear alongside my people, and journalists are still the enemy of the state. The next day, Trump went on Ellison State News, CBS, for a cozy sit-down with Norah O'Donnell on 60 Minutes. O'Donnell had one moment of actual journalism. She read the shooter's manifesto into the record, the pedophile, rapist, traitor part, and Trump unprompted volunteered, "I'm not a rapist, I'm not a pedophile." She hadn't said it was about him. He brought Epstein into the room himself, declaring himself totally exonerated, and then called O'Donnell a disgrace and called journalists horrible people. Still, she thanked him profusely for even deigning to grace them with his presence the night before. Now, the interview that aired was heavily edited. Gone were Trump rambling about the No Kings protests and the KKK both being funded by the Southern Law Deal, calling Charlottesville a staged hoax, and a word salad blaming trans athletes and empty mental institutions for these assassination attempts. Ironically, this from the man who sued CBS for lightly editing a Kamala Harris interview during the 2024 election cycle. Now, Trump's lackeys have neutered CBS, so now he has his sights turned to ABC. Jimmy Kimmel joking that Melania had a, quote, glow like an expectant widow in a mock Correspondents dinner segment bit before any of this happened. But like I said, Trump is nothing if not an opportunist. He and Melania called for Kimmel's firing, and the FCC ordered Disney to file early license renewals on all 8 of its network-owned ABC stations, not due until 2028. Citing DEI policies. That's their excuse anyway. The Democratic commissioner on the FCC called it the most egregious First Amendment violation in the agency's history. And continuing the war on free speech, Carolyn Leavitt, having just gone on maternity leave, came back briefly to hold a press conference arguing that calling Trump the fascist he is legally indistinguishable from the shooter's manifesto, reading Democratic officials' names aloud like a target list, making no mention of Trump's own years of vermin and enemies of the state rhetoric, while a pardoned January 6th insurrectionist had already threatened to kill House Speaker or House Leader, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. The House Leader fired back, quote, "Get lost and clean up your own house." Now, Fred, you're an artist who also makes political content, and the FCC just put every broadcaster in America on notice that their licenses are one bad joke away from an early audit. Does that change how you think about what you put into the world and what it should mean for the rest of us who do the same?
Yeah, I kind of wrestle with it because for a long time I didn't really speak up politically. A lot of my time and effort was really put into like more community work. working with people that I like and care about, talking about politics from like an on the ground level. And it's really in the last couple of years seeing the rise of people like Andrew Tate, the manosphere type stuff that really didn't connect with me. And probably because I'm a little older, I'm 36 years old. I'm right in the middle of the millennial group. But I realized like there was a need for more masculine, male presenting people to like get up and speak and talk about things, as uncomfortable as it can be. And as there can always be like lashing back and all of that stuff, it still felt really valuable and still feels really valuable to me. I think that this will weed out a lot of people who aren't very serious in their convictions of doing these things. I think that it will put a lot of pressure on people who are opportunistic, that are looking for another opportunity to make a little bit more money, who are looking for more fame, because it isn't going to be convenient any longer. You can't just get online, say whatever you want, and not expect that it will affect you. I found out through my agent that I got turned down for an opportunity, an installation, because of what I said on the internet. And as much as that stinks, it's also something that I am okay with that reality. Like, to know that the words that I say have an effect on the material world, even though it may be something that someone doesn't like to hear or upsets them or whatever. I still think that like speaking up out of a place of, personal experience, out of a place of research and understanding, will still be valuable and will probably become more valuable on the ground level because of those changes to the institution. It's just harder to trust. It's harder to like really know if they have our best interest at hand.
Yeah. And now Sharon, like, KK Caroline stood at that podium. She read a list of Democratic officials' names with these decontextualized quotes and explicitly argued that political speech is legally indistinguishable from a would-be assassin's manifesto. You're running for office yourself as a Democratic candidate whose name could end up on a list like that. Does it give you pause before speaking your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, it gives me pause, but at the same time, it's not going to change what I'm doing. I mean, I've had foreign exchange students, and I have been worried about leaving the country to go visit my foreign exchange students just based on things that I have put out on the internet. I still have my passport as far as I know. But one of the most curious things to me about what happened last week was how quickly they got him onto 60 Minutes. And despite like, even in light of, the editing that we found out about afterwards, like, that's not something that generally happens on 60 Minutes. It's a very, at least historically, has been a very planned out show where, they promote their stories sometimes weeks in advance. And so I feel like that added maybe to some of the conspiracy that we were hearing, because they got him on to talk about it. And then, he got it, and maybe he was being promoted. I don't know. I haven't been watching a lot of CBS, which used to be my favorite network. And I think also people are missing the plot on the stuff with Jimmy Kimmel, because what he said did happen. And I'm sorry to Melania, but you married you married someone significantly older than you. And that is kind of where if I would have seen that comment independent of what happened at the dinner, I would have been like, oh, it's because he's a lot older than she is, not because of what happened. And then there was also what Caroline Levitt said about there were going to be shots fired that night at the dinner.
That's like the one thing that everybody is like latched onto, is like, oh, it's a conspiracy. Like, I mean, it's a common phrase. I don't know. It's the whole thing just is grasping at straws.
Well, and especially coming from the right.
At straws. Their people are grasping at straws. Like, I don't know, man. Let's find out. Now, I don't trust this administration to give us accurate information, but that doesn't mean that it's a conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean, violent rhetoric has been in play for a while. Like using something like shots fired at an event like that, where they are taking shots at journalists, professionally, maybe not physically, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, it's like, it's in line with all of it. It gives them a reason to, create more chaos, create more conspiracy. I mean, they rode the wave of conspiracy to the White House.
That's very true.
It has worked really well. It's a very good strategy if you don't have a lot of moral fortitude.
Well, and going back a little bit.
Go ahead, Sharon, really quick, and then I got to move on.
Yeah. Going back to what we were talking about previously, I don't think it's a conspiracy, but I do think they had prior knowledge that maybe made them drop the security just a little bit based on some of the things that I've seen in the days since.
I don't know. I'm still going to go with do not assign to malice what you can assign to incompetence. But
fair.
let's talk about, this opportunist administration, and their strongman routine extends beyond the media. Right now, some of what they've done is just merely tacky. Right, Trump's face and gold signature are now going to be on a limited edition passport for the 250th anniversary. The State Department couldn't confirm whether a sitting president has ever appeared on the passport before, but Fox News could because they had the exclusive before the announcement. His name or face now appears on dollar bills, gold coins, national park passes, federal agency banners, the Kennedy Center, the Institute of Peace, battleships, a prescription drug website, and baby investment accounts. It's Banana Republic shit, but mostly harmless, right? Less harmless is this. An AP review found that the Trump administration violated court orders in at least 31 lawsuits in just 15 months, roughly 1 in 8 cases where courts blocked its actions, plus over 250 violations in individual immigration cases. Prior administration averaged like a few violations per term. Also bad. Higher courts have sided with the administration in nearly half those cases, which Justice Sonia Sotomayor in dissent called exactly what it is, rewarding noncompliance until noncompliance becomes the norm. Now, here's one they'll probably follow, though. The Fifth Circuit this week blocked Mifepristone from being mailed or prescribed via telemedicine, requiring in-person dispensing only. Mail order Mifepristone had become the primary workaround for abortion access since Dobbs in every state, including states where abortion remains legal. The Supreme Court unanimously preserved access back in 2024, but punted on the core issue, and now we're headed back there for an emergency appeal. Now, meanwhile, Trump's DOJ indicted James Comey, the former FBI director, for the second time over a beach photo of seashells that spelled out 8647. Legal experts call it an almost certain loser. Like I said, this is the second time the regime has indicted Comey. The first was thrown out because the prosecutor was improperly appointed. Now, perhaps the most concerning development is that despite all of this authoritarian behavior we just documented, 42 House Democrats this week helped Republicans pass a clean FISA Section 702 extension, a 3-year blank check for warrantless surveillance of Americans' communications, the same authority that has already been used to spy on Black Lives Matter protesters, members of Congress, journalists, and campaign donors. 22 Republicans voted against it, 42 Democrats for it, providing the margin. Democratic leadership didn't even whip against it, and one of those 42 was Indiana's own 1st Congressional District Representative Frank Mrvan. Sharon, I sort of wanted to wedge this one in here, even though it doesn't necessarily fit, but it is part of the long-term overall authoritarian capture of our court system. You know, the Fifth Circuit just blocked the mail order Mifepristone nationwide, pending appeal, obviously, but Indiana women are already living under a near total ban, and getting this necessary drug has been a lifeline. How devastating will it be if this thing actually takes effect?
I think it will be immensely devastating. As a woman who specifically got a hysterectomy as a result of the overturn of Roe versus Wade out of fears for my own personal medical health, it is absolutely just horrifying to me that this has been, that this is even still a conversation. And that I can't even put into words how much of a frustration this one is, because it just flies in the face of the freedom that every woman who has been born since Roe versus Wade was put into law. We just haven't had freedom since 2022. And it is incredibly frustrating to know that the government is so involved in our bodies.
Yeah, matter of time before they're like checking our mail, right? I mean, that's part of Project 2025. They literally want to do that. It's like the Comstock Act from 1867 or something. It's insane. Fred, to that effect, we've just spent several minutes sort of detailing a litany of strongman maneuvers, and one of our own Democratic Congressman, Frank Mrvan, just voted with the administration to give them permission to spy on Americans. Dissenters, perhaps even us. With Democrats like these, who even needs Republicans?
Yeah. I mean, it feels, when I saw that list, I was like, please tell me no one from Indiana voted for this as a Democrat. And to see Frank Mrvan, I mean, I don't know a lot about his politics. I haven't done a lot of research just as I'm not in that area. It bums me out a little bit, especially where we are right now. I think what's really hard for me is like, I grew up in Southern Indiana, pretty poor. My dad was a veteran, had schizophrenia. My mom, dealt with the abuse that came from that. Our family did. And to see how, unwanted pregnancies, lack of abortion access really just leads to like more abuse for children, leads to more violence in the household, leads to women being stuck in relationships longer than they need to and risking their lives. We were really lucky to like avoid being killed by my dad at one point. He had a mental breakdown. The police showed up before he was able to get the gun out of the car. And to look at the way that we have continued to push forward these ideas that like, well, we want a good, healthy family, but we're not going to allow women the power over their bodies to help keep themselves safe, to keep their families safe, to make decisions when they have been raped or coerced into sex. Like that, to me, I think really sets the tone for everything else that's coming. It's a lack of care or interest for the working class. It's a lack of care and interest for people who will actually be affected by these policies. Like, as much as I am frustrated by surveillance, as much as I'm frustrated by all of that, I used to work in big tech. I know how much information is out there. I know how, although we may be like, well, the government can spy on us, really one, letter from a lawyer can get any of these companies to turn over their data on any of us. The government doesn't really need to have all of these laws in place while we allow businesses to spy on us and get that information. It creates, I think, overall, just a really big, I hate to use the word like chilling effect on free speech, but it really does. It really creates a not only that, it creates an effect on the economy. It creates an effect on households, on safety in our communities. And for me, it's like, this is a way to divide and separate each of us on the ground floor to, argue with our neighbor because he's rolling coal or because she got an abortion or whatever it is, rather than realizing like, we are being manipulated and pitted against each other, even though we share the same water and air and all of that stuff.
I'll tell you what, Fred, I'm glad you brought up the abuse dynamic. I'm not glad you had to relay a first person story about it, because that means, you felt that in your life, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. But like the dynamic in families and interpersonal relationships is the same as it is at scale in a government level. Like authoritarianism, fascism is abuse. You've got that like abusive father figure, and that chilling effect is the same as shut up or dad's gonna hit you, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing, and I'm sorry, and it sucks, and we're all that scared kid right now, it seems like. Unfortunately,
it's a symptom of the bigger reality, which is really tough. Like we can't solve the problem at the root, so we have to deal with the symptoms, and that's hard.
Let's talk about another dysfunctional family here really quick, who actually showed out well this time, ironically. So, with all of everything we just talked about in the background and Trump doing his king shit, the actual king, Charles and Queen Camilla of the UK, visited the United States this week. So the same week in which the White House posted a photo of Trump and Charles captioned "Two Kings," the same week Trump told 60 Minutes, "I'm not a king," and blamed the No Kings protesters for inspiring the attempted shooter, Charles addressed a joint session of Congress. And here, the irony is so thick, you could spread it on toast if the British hadn't already put baked beans there. Ugh. The actual king, the one with the crowns and the castles and the whole deal, stood before Congress and delivered a pointed, elegant defense of separation of powers, an independent judiciary, and checks and balances, drawing a standing ovation from both parties. He cited the Magna Carta, which the U.S. Supreme Court has referenced 160 times as the foundation of the principle that executive power has limits, while the man, his own White House, just called an American king, was busy ignoring court orders at a rate no prior administration has matched. Standing feet from Vice President J.D. Vance, who has questioned support for our beleaguered ally, Charles called for unyielding resolve on Ukraine and announced Britain's biggest sustained defense spending increase since the Cold War. He praised NATO as essential to transatlantic security. Not once was Trump mentioned by name in the King's speech. He didn't need to. A certain understated British flair, our little gold-plated tyrant, couldn't manage to save his own life. Now, Sharon, you guys are both a little bit younger than I am, but Charles was a punchline most of my life. Yet here he was playing the situation expertly. The whole thing feels surreal. Why are we cheering for the royals? This is America, damn it.
Why did you have to do that? No, I was impressed with what came out of Charles' mouth, because like you said, he has been kind of we make fun of the royal family, or we treat them as pompous, or thinking that they're above us, which kind of goes back to what Fred said earlier about how these people for example, these people have access to an abortion, even with the laws, right? They have access to the things that we do not have. And I think that kind of maybe what Charles was trying to say is that they had used the United States as an example for a long time. And now, they're realizing that maybe they shouldn't have done that. And I want to go back to what you said about the contradiction here between Donald Trump calling himself a king in one breath and telling people he's not a king in the same breath, within 48 hours of one another. It's insane. Does he think people aren't paying attention? Does he not care? Who's he actually talking to? Who is he actually talking to? Because it doesn't seem like it's necessarily us. But I will say that as a millennial woman, I was pretty excited to see that we had the royals here in the United States, first time since 2008, that we had the sitting royal member in the country. So that was kind of cool.
Fred, I'll say the same thing I said to Sharon. This is America, damn it. I thought we got rid of these people. There was a little war about it. And yet here we are, the king, the actual king, is lecturing us rather effectively, I might add, on the separation of powers, on the limits of absolute authority. To quote a certain member of the British Commonwealth, a Canadian, Alanis Morissette, isn't it ironic? Don't you think?
It is really funny. I honestly don't keep up with the royals. I don't like power that just exists for its own sake. I lean much more towards the mindset of hey, the reason why the royals exist is because at some point there was deep inequality. They have found a way to hold on to that inequality through, centuries at this point, almost 1,000 years. Well, I don't know, maybe back to the 13 or 1400s. I don't follow enough of the history recently.
Some watery tart threw a sword at somebody, and
yeah. I've been to London a bunch of times, and I've had conversations with people about America, and they're like, "Oh yeah, your country's 250 years old. The pub we're in right now is 500." So I think it's very interesting that he's came over here with his big fingers and wanted to waggle them at us and give us some advice. But I just it feels really, I just don't want to listen. And maybe this is my own problem, but I just don't really care to listen to people who have that deep degree of separation from the common people that they're trying to represent or trying to talk to. It feels nice, but it just feels like more rhetoric to try and keep himself in the good graces of what's happening in Europe, which is a counterpoint to what's happening in the US right now.
I'm glad you brought that up, and let's use that as a way to turn the page here, because, like you said, Charles, he largely avoided the subject of Iran during this visit. Notably, given that Britain is a NATO ally with a significant interest in the Persian Gulf, and, the war has opened a real rift between the United States and its European partners. That rift got more concrete this week when Secretary of Defense Drinky Pete Hegseth ordered the withdrawal of 5,000 American troops from Germany. Not the result of any strategic review, mind you, the result of an impulsive Trump social media post, and widely understood as retaliation against European allies for their limited enthusiasm for a war they didn't ask for and didn't sign up to fight. Now, the war itself, in which a tenuous ceasefire seems to be holding while the sides have reached a stalemate, we ended last week with Trump canceling his envoy's trip to Pakistan for negotiations. Iran responded by submitting a formal proposal to reopen the strait, end the war, lift the blockade, with nuclear talks to come later. Secretary of State Marco Rubio immediately declared the conditions insufficient, and Trump said Friday he was still not satisfied. Then Iran submitted a 14-point counter proposal through Pakistani mediators, which the president says he's currently reviewing, while leaving the door open to resuming strikes if Iran, quote, misbehaves. Now, back to old Drinky Pete. He spent the week getting grilled on Capitol Hill. $25 billion spent on this war in his estimation. 13 Americans killed, 400 injured. The strait still closed. Iran still has nuclear enrichment. The economic costs, which we'll talk about shortly, continue to pile up. The lawmakers think the real cost of the war itself is closer to $100 billion. But Hegseth called congressional critics, quote, the biggest adversary we face. And to avoid seeking the congressional authorization the War Powers Resolution requires, the administration declared the war, quote, terminated, arguing the ceasefire paused the 60-day clock. Senator Tim Kaine's response is that the statute does not support this. Maine Republican Susan Collins called for an end to the military action, saying, quote, that deadline is not a suggestion, it is a requirement, demanding a clear mission and defined exit strategy. One hawkish think tank advisor's workaround, just declare a new operation called Epic Passage, focused on reopening the strait, which would reset the 60-day clock entirely. Sharon, listen, Congress might be corrupt, but they're not stupid. You can just declare the war paused and give the mission a new name every 60 days and go on like this forever? Like, that's the kind of workaround a 6-year-old would come up with. Like, what's next? Epic Fury 2 Electric Boogaloo?
Oh, that name was something, Scott.
I like the Electric Boogaloo. Anytime you add that, I'm happy. I approve. I vote for this war now. I changed my mind.
Gosh. Oh, man. You can't say that you terminated something and then the language surrounding this is just absolutely illogical. Like, I can't follow what is being proposed anymore. It is absolutely fascinating to me that we are now using Pakistan as mediators, given our prior history with Pakistan and how we've engaged with them in the past. And then we have parts of that part of the world where people are being told, don't go to tourism areas. I actually had a friend, I don't know if you saw the article about going to Baku, Azerbaijan, people, basically tourists being discouraged from going there because of the war that we have started for as yet undisclosed or undescribed reasons. But I had a friend who got to spend some time in Baku several years ago, and it's just a beautiful place. And so that one really struck me. Like, who even picks that place to go? I didn't realize it was becoming a tourist destination. But at the same time, like, the fact that we're discouraging it because of something that we started is also something.
I did not know that either. I hear that the Caspian area is lovely this time of year. Fred, what's the off ramp here, man? Like, obviously, Trump is from like the Roy Cohn school of never admit defeat, never admit you were wrong. So, like, what's the way out of this thing without looking like you made a mistake? Because he can't admit that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there really is at this point. It's like I don't know, like there's a story in the Bible where Jesus heals a blind man of his blindness, and he goes, walking out of the temple or something. The Pharisees see him and they're like, "What the hell were you doing, my dude? You're not allowed to do that. It's the Sabbath. That's the rule. You can't heal people on the Sabbath. You can't help anybody on the Sabbath. You've done the wrong thing." And he's like, this is stupid. Like I'm doing good things for good people. And I think the opposite thing is happening with the Trump administration with this specific issue with Iran. We're using the letter of the law to do something that we want to do to make ourselves feel good. And unfortunately, there is not a resolution to that problem until somebody admits they made a mistake, that they shouldn't have done what they did, that they need to apologize. I mean, we have gone so far into the Middle East year after year after decade. My dad fought in the Middle East. Like I wouldn't be surprised if I found out one of my grandpas fought in the Middle East too. Like we need to leave them alone. We need to, just accept that these are people that have different ideas than us, that if we want to collaborate them, if we want their oil, we need to pay for it the same way we do with everything else. And I think because of hubris, we will not see like a solid end to this war. We will see more justification and more justification until hopefully the next leader of this country, if it still is the same name as it was before, does something, changes it.
Let's talk about the economic fallout from this thing, because for all the death and destruction over there, most Americans only care about their wallets, and not great on that front either. So the United Arab Emirates quit OPEC last Friday. This is the second most important member of the cartel. They're gone, a direct consequence of Iranian missile and drone attacks on the Emirates shipping and infrastructure, though Abu Dhabi didn't officially say so. Together with Saudi Arabia, the Emirates controlled most of the world's spare capacity. Its departure leaves OPEC structurally weaker and undermines Saudi ability to manage the organization. Short term, it changes little with the strait closed, but when the strait reopens, whenever the strait reopens, UAE is expected to pump at maximum capacity without OPEC constraints, potentially flooding a recovering market and bringing down prices. But for now, Brent crude hit a $126 a barrel this week, the highest since 2022, up 13% in 24 hours after Trump told oil executives the blockade could last months if needed. One casualty of the astronomical oil prices, Spirit Airlines, which shut down Saturday after 34 years, 17,000 workers unemployed overnight. Now, here in Indiana, the pain is less dramatic, but severe nonetheless. Our state led the nation in week-over-week gas price increases, up to an average of $4.78, with some stations hitting $4.99, like all the ones around here by me, compounded by the BP Whiting refinery going unexpectedly offline. Governor Mifepristone had already suspended the state sales tax on gas, but that only covers the 17-cent sales tax, not the 36-cent excise tax. Hoosiers are still carrying one of the top 5 highest gas tax burdens in the country. Braun is expected to renew the gas tax holiday, but can only do so for another 30 days before needing to call the legislature into a special session. And Indiana farmers are getting squeezed from both ends. Diesel is nearing $6 a gallon. Fertilizer prices are near peak levels. Corn and soybean near below break even. The political question hanging all over all of this: Indiana farmers overwhelmingly voted for Trump 3 times. The midterms are in November. Will this change the way rural Hoosiers actually vote? Sharon, what do you think?
I mean, I hope so, of course. I feel like we definitely need something. Something's got to give here. I have been struggling to remember what happened in 2022 that made gas prices spike. I probably should have researched that before I hopped on here. But the fact that it is now $5.
Yeah.
Yes. The fact that it is now $5 basically in the entire state, in one of the states that has one of the highest taxes, which is a whole different issue. The fact that it is at the pricing that it is at, like I was looking in Chicago, so that's where my sister lives, and I'm like, we're almost at Chicago prices. This is not supposed to happen throughout the bulk of Indiana. Like maybe occasionally as you're crossing 80-90 into Illinois, you might see those types of numbers, but not in Indianapolis, not in Fort Wayne, not down in Bloomington. And the fact that like that is probably the good that all of us consistently have to purchase, especially in Indiana, because we don't have good public transportation infrastructure. It's impacting every single Hoosier's wallet, and they should be paying attention to the facts that they are doing that. And so I hope it changes how people vote in November, because otherwise, what are we doing?
Yeah. Fred, what do you think?
I think it really only changes how people vote if there's a better message and like a reliable person to go to. Because if the only option that you have in most of these counties, most of these districts is another, like, I don't know, other Republican, this one's vanilla and this one's vanilla plus. It's like, okay, great. What else are you going to vote for? And I think what I see, at least from like an economic perspective, you mentioned it with public transit. Like if you look at Europe, the reason why gas prices, they're like, oh, it's $5 a gallon is crazy. And it's like, it's been $5 a liter in Europe. I don't know the actual number. That's probably a little extreme, but
it's much more expensive there for sure.
It's far more expensive.
I actually looked that up.
I
actually looked that up earlier this week. It is currently between $8 and $9 a gallon in Europe.
Oh yeah. Yep.
In Italy specifically.
Yes. Trying to take a road trip, I'll join you. That sounds great. But I think what I see in it is that the solution that we've needed to enact for a long time and haven't, because of the way that we've structured gas and the way that we've structured our like zoning and our cities, is that like gas is the lifeblood of America. Instead of looking and saying that people are the lifeblood of America, that if we can get public transit that connects the state, just the state alone. I mean, if you could come from Fort Wayne to Indianapolis for a job, and yes, it may take an hour or two on a train or whatever, but like if you could do that, that would really increase the economic value and the power that we have here. It would mean that we could keep the higher taxes on gas, and that would be spent by truckers. It would lower the gas prices overall. But we aren't making that decision because we are stuck in like a kind of hellhole of a fight over just stupid things, it feels. And like when I look at the economy, it really is like if the working class, if the people who represent the majority of the economic power in this country, the people who actually drive it, are doing well, then overall we will be doing well as a country. We've seen that in the past. Hopefully we will see that in the future, and we see that across the world. I mean, I don't know, or maybe we start an oil company.
Well, it's so much of this, Fred. It's money in politics. It's the oil cartel in our country owns the Republican Party for sure, and they've got their tentacles into the Democrats. You got the auto industry. I mean, like the incentives for our elected leaders to actually do something about the root of the problem, is washed away by all of this cash that they need to keep running for re-election. Let's talk about elections and voting specifically at the national level. We'll talk about Indiana elections on the back half of the show, but in the electoral consequences of this war, right, are real and they are coming. But there are other electoral developments this week that deserve our attention. Now, in Maine, Governor Janet Mills dropped out of the Senate race on Friday, citing a lack of funds, handing the Democratic primary to the oyster farmer and combat veteran Graham Plattner, who had already lapped her in polling and fundraising despite zero establishment backing. As a progressive, I'm definitely keeping an eye on this one. Just as we've been keeping an eye on the tit-for-tat gerrymandering war kicked off last year by Texas, rejected in December here in Indiana, and most recently answered by Democrats in Virginia, where their Supreme Court this week heard arguments over whether to let new maps stand. But this week, the U.S. Supreme Court drastically changed the playing field and blew a massive hole in perhaps the signature achievement of the civil rights movement. And more than any other story this week, this one might be the most important. In a 6-3 vote along partisan lines, the court gutted Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The practical effect is that states can now draw maps that dilute black voting power as long as they claim partisan rather than racial motivation. Justice Elena Kagan, in a powerful dissent, said Section 2 is now, quote, all but a dead letter, and warned that majority black districts across the South, quote, exist only on sufferance and probably not for long. And disempowering black voters has been Chief Justice John Roberts' wet dream for decades. He was the primary architect of the Reagan administration's opposition to the Voting Rights Act's effects test in 1982, writing the talking points, scripting Reagan's statements, driving the policy fight, and then told Congress at his 2005 confirmation hearing that he was merely, quote, a 26-year-old staff lawyer following orders. This quota system framing in this week's majority opinion is lifted almost verbatim from Roberts' 1982 memos. This is a 40-plus year project led by the same person, finally finished to completion, and the ink wasn't even dry before southern states started moving. Now, Florida already had its maps ready. The legislature there passed them the same day as the ruling, designed to flip up to 4 Democratic-leaning seats. Louisiana suspended its May 16th House primaries with early voting days away and ballots already mailed to overseas voters, so the legislature can redraw the map and eliminate a majority black district first. Alabama called a special session for May 4th. Mississippi, Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee are all plotting their next moves. UCLA election law professor Richard Hazen called Louisiana's move, quote, naked partisanship, then noted that under this Supreme Court, naked partisanship is actually more of a defense than an indictment. The court ruled explicit racial gerrymandering illegal, but partisan gerrymandering is just fine. Sharon, I don't know if I'm more angry or sad in the wake of this ruling. What about you?
Yeah, that's been the emotions this week, for sure, related to this particular thing. And then to find out that it has been really a pet project of one of our Supreme Court justices who are supposed to be unbiased, theoretically.
Just balls and strikes, Sharon. Just balls and strikes.
But the fact that, like, this has been, it makes you really wonder how long all of this has been a plan and for why. Why has this been a plan and I'm not just talking about I'm going conspiracy theory a little bit on you a little bit here, but this really highlights that there has been something going on in the dark places of America for decades. And the question is, why? What is the point? Why are they trying to hurt people so much when they are doing these things? And who does it ultimately benefit? And it's incredibly frustrating, especially when also in the midst of all this, people have been given rights. They've lived with those rights for decades. And now, again, we are losing those rights. And it makes me, in some ways, really glad that we went through our redistricting effort so much earlier in the year, because now ours is set. Our election is Tuesday. And so we're not going to be subject to some of this. I don't even have the right word. Horse hockey, malarkey. Malarkey, right. Yes. At the same level. But I wish more people realized how it's all connected. It is all connected, and it doesn't necessarily matter that Virginia did what they did and Louisiana can do what they did. Ultimately, it comes down to the fact that we are all going to be impacted by it.
And well, listen, it's still it's all connected back to the founding of this country, and we've still yet to fully reconcile our racist history. This ruling is pure racism, couched in like race neutral language, right? They used the 15th Amendment against itself to disenfranchise black voters here today. They're saying they basically claimed reverse discrimination, that these districts drawn to give black folks even kind of equal representation in the South were somehow discriminatory against white folks. It's insane. And Fred, I guess, listen, the only way we're going to rectify this, I think, is to reform the Supreme Court entirely, do something drastic about it. I'd eliminate the whole thing entirely if it was up to me. But I guess for now, let's take them at their word and say, okay, well, we can't do racial gerrymandering. We can only do partisan gerrymandering. It isn't the thing to do then to just ban all forms of gerrymandering nationwide.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the solution at the end of the day. I mean, we've been needing election reform for, centuries, for a very, very, very long time, especially as technology has progressed. I'm a big fan of, do you know who Lawrence Lessig is?
Yes.
Yeah, he wrote a book called They Don't Represent Us. That's about elections, about representation, about the problems with the way that we do the first past the poll type election, or first past the post. I can never remember if it's poll or post.
Yeah.
Is it post?
Post. Yes.
There we go. I always think like post office. It's like, are they racing past the post office? That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we've been needing election reform for a really long time. This is unfortunately like the long history of our country has been fighting over, do we allow more people to represent themselves and deal with the reality that like it will be less unequal, that there will be I think the average person wants more equality of opportunity, more equality of access. They are okay with some people being wealthy and having more, but they are not okay with everyone else having less as a result. And I think that voting has just continued down this path of the people versus the elites. And I think we're just in that pendulum swing of the elites have more power and they're doing what they can on the voting side, like they have historically. What was it? We made you a democracy if you can keep it, and we are not keeping it very well.
Sharon, I guess I want to get your final thoughts on this particular story before we turn the corner and move on to the Indiana half of our show.
I mean, I think Fred said it very, very well, that they made us a democracy if we could keep it. And we have followed the path that so many civilizations have followed, that has been written about, where we have allowed the proletariat to take over and, the working class. And we have to find a way to get back to the working class being the ones that are in charge.
And we never were. I guess they only let us have a taste. They certainly this really puts a damper on the long arc of history argument. I think folks our age were sort of taught that the history was a sort of linear progression, and America was always moving up and moving toward more equality and more fairness. And this, like you mentioned, Fred, sort of it shows the cyclical nature of things, and that we come in cycles, and there are times when the elites dominate more and the wealthy dominate more. And we are, I think, nearing the critical point in one of these cycles where it can go one way or the other. And this, over these next few years, is going to be a real critical period in determining the direction of our country and the world, for that matter, going forward. I mean, listen, who's going to be in charge as we put the things in place to fight or not climate change over the next 4 generations? We'll talk about that a little bit here at the end of the show as well. But for now, let us turn the corner and move to the intersection of these U.S. and international stories where they intersect with our state, segment that I like to call the Crossroads. Now, this week, the U.S. Department of Agriculture confirmed that Indianapolis will become one of 5 national hubs for the new Food and Nutrition Administration, relocating SNAP program offices from Washington. Senator Jim Banks and Governor Mike Braun are both falling over each other to claim credit for landing this move. And now here's the irony. The House just passed a farm bill that locks in the $187 billion in SNAP cuts already made by last year's One Big Beautiful Bill. And new federal work requirements will affect about 12,000 Indiana recipients who must now report their work hours, with any reduction potentially triggering benefit loss and months of bureaucratic reinstatement to get it back. A Hamilton Project analysis found stricter work requirements reduce SNAP participation more than they increase employment, meaning they don't get people jobs, they just get people off food assistance. Now, the Senate has not taken up their version of the farm bill yet. A couple of wins tucked into the House bill, though. An amendment stripped a provision that would have shielded Roundup maker Monsanto from cancer liability lawsuits, and SNAP recipients can now, at least those of them who are getting benefits, can now buy rotisserie chicken with those benefits, though that was the only hot food item added. This has been kind of a long-standing quirk of the system that you can't buy hot food with your benefits, even though, like, people need to eat, right? Most Democrats voted against the farm bill, as accepting those couple wins would have meant accepting the cuts that came with them. Fred, I hate to keep coming back to Alanis Morissette, but isn't it ironic that Indianapolis is becoming a hub for a program our own state lawmakers just spent the last legislative session making it more difficult for Hoosiers to access?
It is so ironic. Honestly, I wish Alanis Morissette could just come on the show and sing that every time you say it. It would make my life so much better.
Alanis, if you're listening.
Also, at least we're recording.
Yeah, we get a little, but also the Trump impersonations are sending me. I love it. Gosh, I mean, for me, like I grew up on free food. I grew up on free school food. We had food stamps, which is now SNAP benefits. I am here because I had access to food at times. And as I got in my teen years, it became a lot harder. My dad, with his mental illness, I was living with him. He didn't get food stamps. He'd give us $40 every couple weeks. And then we go to the church down the road, which is a big mega church. They always had pizza. And I can't tell you how many times I just like walk through the offices trying to find leftover boxes of pizza and take those home. And I look at my own upbringing. It's like, well, we made it work. We found a solution. I'm well fed. My brother's well fed. My sister's well fed. Things are okay. We're doing all right. But it's because we were in a society that had wealth. I grew up in the 90s when we had more wealth spread throughout all of the economy. My mom and dad, who both, didn't go to college. My dad's a veteran. My mom worked odd jobs here and there. We were still able to provide for us in some semblance of life. But I even saw, I had some friends, Matt and Chad, growing up, whose mom, through abuse, through drug addiction, through all of those things, didn't provide and didn't give access to that. And that is going to become and is becoming more and more prominent in America in the way that it had been since before the 50s. To me, it's like, I look at Indiana. We are not really the bread basket of America. We're the corn and soy basket of America, but we have so much land available for food. We have so much, access to nature, to all of these things. Like the fact that we do not, as our state, who, is mostly cornfields, mostly food that you can look out and see any day, don't have it built into our Constitution, built into our ideology of being a Hoosier, that every Hoosier should be able to eat well, to eat healthy, and that should be accessible at all levels, is just stupid for us. Like it makes our economy worse, it makes our lives worse, it makes rich people worse. Like it's not. I think what frustrates me is that they don't see that the connection is so so strong between the working class and the rich, and that if you keep taking from the working class and giving it to the rich, eventually you won't have a wealthy. Eventually you will have assassinations. You will have these problems that create all of this. It's not sustainable, and it's just stupid that we're getting snap here and we haven't figured our own problems out when it comes to.
Yeah, you're right, Fred. It's like a crappy game of Monopoly where like one person owns everything, but it's like interminable and doesn't end, and eventually like the people who are losing are going to throw over the board and say enough of this crap. And it is ironic, I think, again, there's the word that these people who are taking away benefits, they call themselves Christians. Like Sharon, look, we've seen making it more difficult for people to access these benefits doesn't increase employment. It just means more people are going hungry. The cruelty is the point, isn't it?
It's absolutely the point. And I think that a lot of the time the wealthy forget that one of them is the least wealthy of the wealthy. So as they, as they pick those who are impoverished, they pick the middle class off one by one. Eventually it is going to reach them. I also think they forget that consumers need to be able to provide for themselves in order to consider, let's just look at this from a completely capitalist perspective, which is my least favorite perspective to look at things through, but let's do that for 30 seconds. If they don't have people that can afford to engage in capitalism, they don't have capitalism. And therefore, their wealth is going to disappear, and they seem to forget that. And one thing I do want to touch on, the only hot food item, rotisserie chicken. I have a good friend up here in Fort Wayne that runs an organization called Blessings in a Backpack. And they have so what Blessings Backpack does, provides food for kids every single week. Every weekend, a kiddo goes home with a bag of food, and that food is specifically prepared, or specifically food they can eat where they don't have to heat it up. They don't have to microwave it. They've taken real great care to make sure that those food items are food items that don't even a refrigerant source, because they know that not every child has access to that, but they want to make sure kids are fed. And let's go back to ultimately what Fred said, that yes, people are losing out on food, but it is also a significant number of children who lose out on food because their parents are not able to provide for them because they don't have these benefits. We look at it as just the people who aren't working, but it is millions of children that are going hungry because of the cruelty.
And I'll come back to the irony of these folks calling themselves Christians. Like, what do you do to the least of these? And I think the least of these would be hungry children by most standards. It's insane.
Well, let us. It misses. Sorry, as a former Christian at this point, it always frustrates me when I look at the story of the sheep and the goats. It's in Matthew 25. Jesus does a story where he's like, hey, a bunch of people come to heaven, and God is dividing up who are the sheep and who are the goats, who are the good and who are the bad. And his whole argument that he repeats, he says, for when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. And for me, when you look at these tests that Jesus puts forward in the Bible, or the writers of the Bible, I guess Matthew in this case, it becomes really simple to decide who is a Christian. Do you have the fruits of the Spirit? Do you do good for the people who are in need? And for those of you who don't, he'll say, depart from me, you who are wicked, who are cursed, get out of here. And it frustrates me because I do still follow so many of these ideas, these concepts, morals or whatever that the Bible does put out. And I find them really valuable and beneficial to society. And so it's really sad to see that is the message that has become the most common and pervasive one in the church, when there's so many better things that Jesus said himself.
100%.
These Christian nationalists who are doing the Project 2025 stuff that that's what these work requirements and SNAP benefit cuts and everything else go back to. they forget that part of the Bible. It's all Old Testament. It's all the fire and the brimstone and the smiting, and none of the Jesus. Again, ironic, don't you think? Let's move on. And we just talked about the farm bill here a second ago, and we're going to talk about a couple healthcare stories here momentarily, but let's talk about a place where many would say medicine and farming intersect, and that is marijuana. Governor Braun signaled this week growing openness to legalization, and his reasoning is pretty hard to argue with. 96% of Hoosiers live within a 100-mile drive of a licensed dispensary in another state, and residents are already spending an estimated $1.8 billion annually on cannabis products, just not in Indiana. The Trump administration's federal rescheduling of marijuana last week gave Braun some political cover. Quote, "I think the fact that the feds made that move, that makes it more likely," he said. Indiana is one of only 10 states with no medical marijuana law, and yet unregulated Delta-8 and THCA products are, by the legislature's own admission, ubiquitous across the state because lawmakers have repeatedly failed to either ban or regulate them. A new RAND study estimates legalization could generate $180 million in tax revenue a year by year 5, while Indiana currently spends $10 to $20 million a year just on enforcement. So I don't know, I'm no math major, but that sounds like about $200 million the state could recoup and use toward other things. Sharon, is Indiana finally getting with the times?
Fred's glasses are sending me. They're absolutely sending me. I'm gonna have such interesting dreams tonight between your Trump voice and between those glasses. But I am so glad that we seem like we are moving towards making this legal, because when something is, first of all, there's the economic benefits, but also when something is legalized, it can then be regulated, which then ultimately makes it safer for everybody who wants to engage with it. It can also be taxed, and we have seen where the tax has just skyrocketed and really built up communities in places like Michigan. I actually, before a debate that I had back in March, Coldwater, Michigan, which is I used to have to go up to Michigan regularly because that's where my grandparents lived. And I remember Coldwater being an exit when I was a child. And now it is this bustling place where there's things, right off the highway, but it's definitely growing. You can see how it's growing and how infrastructure is taking place in that area. And so I don't understand, other than whatever the ethical quandary is that some Republicans seem to have in the state of Indiana. I don't understand. Well, I do understand some of it. It's coming from pharmaceutical money. But I don't understand, other than those two things, why we have such significant opposition to it. Or actually, it's not even opposition. They haven't even argued about it, which is almost worse in some ways.
Yeah, and well, listen, if you want to go to the campaign finance of it all, you mentioned the pharmaceutical companies and they're contributing to certain politicians. Listen, the cannabis industry, once developed, they can make campaign contributions too. I don't know why you're leaving that on the table. Fred, what do you think?
I really want the sound effect, the smoke weed every day sound effects, but I don't have the soundboard set up right now. Because I would just do that if I could. But I think cannabis is a great plant. I think it's very valuable. I used to have nerve damage. I got an infection, and I didn't get the right medication. They just gave me the wrong dose, and it turned into nerve damage as a result. The infection came back. It was in my hip, and sitting down kind of sucked. And so when I was traveling for work, I was out in Colorado, I was in LA. I had a couple clients like MedMen who, are dispensaries out there. And they were like, "Hey, you look really uncomfortable sitting for a long time in this meeting. At the end of the meeting, have you ever tried weed? Have you ever tried this for your body?" And I was like, "Oh, I smoked once in high school, when I was 18, and I'm a good kid. I'm not going to do that again." And I remember, having an edible from one of these guys when I got back to my hotel room, and I felt great. My body didn't hurt as much. It really solved a lot of those problems. And then I started finding a dose of some CBD, whatever the little balances are that help some of that inflation or that nerve damage become less acute and painful. And it really helped me. It really helped me be able to get through work. I was traveling a lot. I was in meetings. It was really painful and it was hard to focus. And, a little bit of CBD or, THC gummy at the end of the night was really beneficial. There's a lot of people and there's a lot of ways to get high here in Indiana right now. If we went 5 minutes down the road from my house, we could go to 2, 3, 4 different places that we could smoke a THC dab derived from hemp, and we could get really high and talk about politics. I don't know. I think obviously the economic value is there. What I feel like has not, I think the reason why we are waiting so long for this to be resolved is because there hasn't been a major player, a very big institution, what is the cigarette companies, Marlboro. We don't have like one of those companies. And I think Indiana has a fear of independence. We don't want the small businesses to actually run themselves. We don't want that economic power. We want to have control at the top level to decide what happens. Obviously Purdue Pharma is about to disappear and become something totally different, which is fantastic. Eli Lilly's still in town. I do think that those will have and do have an impact, but I really truly believe that like we as legislators have a fear of our citizens actually being self-empowered and being able to solve their own economic problems and their community's economic problems. Hopefully that changes. And until it does, I don't know, come visit me if you're watching this and I'll show you all the places you can get high in Indianapolis legally.
Very good. Let's turn to some more traditional healthcare stories, as it were. Now, a couple minutes ago, we saw how with the SNAP adding these bureaucratic hurdles doesn't actually save any money. It just pushes people off of programs. Well, the same logic applies to what's happening with Medicaid in Indiana right now. The Family and Social Services Administration is hiring 400 employees to conduct eligibility checks on 560,000 healthy Indiana plan members, at least 3 times more checks than currently required. And here's the kicker. FSSA's own secretary admits the state will save no money from kicking people off. Work requirements take effect January 1st, 2027, requiring 80 hours of monthly work, school, job training, or volunteering. And the one big beautiful bill just shifted SNAP administrative costs from 50% to 75% state funded, hitting Indiana's budget for an unexpected $37 million in fiscal year 2027, rising to $50 million after that. So Indiana is spending more to administer a program in order to cut people without saving anything. And while that's happening, Indiana is also shutting down its special population support program on June 30th of this year, eliminating HIV testing and outreach in addiction treatment settings that conducted 4,575 tests in 2024 alone, because of a $6.7 million drop in federal funding. Gee, that weed money might be able to make up for that. The program targets people with substance use disorders, the unhoused, and the incarcerated populations likely to seek testing in traditional medical settings. The state says HIV treatment won't be affected. Public health experts are uniform that testing is the entry point to treatment. No testing, no diagnosis, no diagnosis, no treatment. Sharon, one of your primary campaign issues is healthcare access. When the state's own secretary admits the Medicaid monitoring saves no money, what's it actually for? Again, is this the cruelty being the point?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. You put a quote in the show rundown, and I'm sorry to reference the show rundown, but I'm gonna, where an individual was quoted as saying, it is the recipient's responsibility basically to keep yourself eligible, but they make the process so flippin' difficult. So even with normal insurance, it is absolutely insane to to walk through all the hoops that you have to walk through. That's with regular insurance. You bring the government into it, it's even worse. And so if we're going to put the responsibility back on the patient, then we have to be sure that those processes make sense. They don't take a lot of time to walk through. They don't take a lot of mental energy to walk through. And that we have people, if we're going to hire people that are doing these checks, they have to be trained in how to walk people through to make sure that if they are eligible, they stay eligible. Also, across the country, we're finding out that a lot of these things where people are going into, check on fraud it's not yielding the amount of fraud that they seem to think exists out there. And so if we're just antagonizing people to antagonize people, then yes, the cruelty is absolutely the point. And if we aren't going to train people in how to make sure that they understand that they're eligible, then what are we doing?
Well, right, because precisely it is not that we're interested. The fraud is not being committed by individuals who are like scamming the system. The fraud is being committed by these large providers who have the resources and the know-how to do it. Fred, so Indiana's shutting down its primary HIV testing program for the populations most at risk. And this reminds me of Trump in the early days of COVID when he complained that increased testing meant the number of cases went up. Is this Indiana saying, well, look, we don't have an HIV problem because we're intentionally putting our heads in the sand? What could possibly go wrong? It's not like we have a history in this state of HIV outbreaks.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely foolish. It's the same kind of thing of like not empowering us to make decisions about our own lives. As much as I would love to encourage people, have safe sex, don't have sex when you don't want to, give consent positively, respect other people's consent, all of those things. The reality is not always that. We know that people get raped all the time. We know that people get sexually assaulted, abused. We know that you can contract HIV by saving someone's life, even if they are HIV positive, they aren't on PrEP and they, their blood gets in your cut or whatever. This is just a reality of being a human being that health issues will come around. I was kicked off the Healthy Indiana plan when I got laid off a couple of years ago. I applied when I transitioned to being an artist full-time and freelancing. I was like, well, I need healthcare. I was on it and I got one of the forms to fill out and they said, you have until this date to fill it out. And as a guy with ADHD, the pressure of filling something out right before the deadline really gets me going. So I filled it out right before the deadline, submitted it. And when I tried to submit it, when I went to the website, it was about a week before it was due. I couldn't submit it. And so I called the state. I said, hey, what happened? Is there something I'm doing wrong? I want to make sure that I have health care. And they said, well, your case is closed. Can I appeal it? Yeah, you can appeal it, but we're not sure if you're going to get it taken care of. And until that appeal goes through, you're not going to have health care. Well, I haven't heard back. I don't have health care. I'm just out here, raw dogging life, as they say, on the news of all places. But I mean, for me, I think it comes down to that, being able to make decisions for ourselves, giving people the empowered ability to solve these problems. If you really believe that people are too dumb to make decisions for themselves, to, have access to the things that they need, I don't know how to argue or change your mind or any of those things. But I do know that it sucks to not have health care in America. It sucks to know that if I'm riding my bike and I get hit by a car, I might just, I might lose my house, which is absolutely wild to think about. I think it really shows the need for each of us to individually understand how we can help our neighbors. I keep Narcan at the house and in my van because I do go to a lot of shows. I go to a lot of parties and events. I, DJ and play music. I know that there's drugs in the area. I know that there are people having sex and, potentially dealing with the consequences of all those things. If we can't give people health care, at the end of the day, each of us is going to have to pay for the fallout. Aaron Rodgers is going to pay for somebody's treatment for HIV. one way or the other, whether it's through your increased rates through your insurance company, through the hospital, or through socialized medicine. It's just deciding what method you take to solve that problem.
Yeah, and there it is. Like, we're all going to pay for it eventually. Why not do this in the most ethical and economical way and take care of these things up front through government intervention, through prevention? Our healthcare system, where our insurance is tied to our jobs, is an incredibly stupid way to do things, particularly with this AI boom coming and the mass unemployment that might go along with it. Along those lines, let's talk about the AI boom and the development of AI data centers in our state, along with some other things. And I've got a couple of stories here along this line, and they might look different on the surface, but they do actually tell the same story. Now, first, about those data centers. DC Blocks, a Georgia-based developer, held a community forum in Irvington seeking buy-in for a $2 billion data center campus on the east side of Indy, near an elementary school and a trail, with about 150 skeptical residents showing up to protest it. The developer is using the variance not rezoning strategy that Decatur Township residents are currently fighting in court, specifically to bypass the full city-county council vote that killed Google's Franklin Township data center last year. Indianapolis released draft zoning rules for data centers, which we discussed last week: 200-foot residential buffer, 65 decibel noise cap, a generator testing ban on the evenings, but critics say the rules are too weak, with no meaningful limits near schools or parks. And speaking of Google, Citizens Action Coalition Director Ben Inskeep points to a new filing with the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, which reveals that Google won't actually be paying for transmission upgrades at its Monrovia data center after all, with AES Indiana adding a profit margin on top, calling into question the claims that we discussed last week that Google and AES would save customers $770 million. You see, they put these press releases out to much fanfare, talking about how much they care for the residents, and then quietly go to work proving the opposite. Meanwhile, Sharon, up in your neck of the woods in Fort Wayne, U.S. Aggregates and the Heritage Group want to put a quarry in southwest Allen County below the water table next to Eagle Marsh and Fox Island County Park with an adjacent asphalt plant. And Fort Wayne's own mayor came out against it, except the site is outside city limits, so she has no jurisdiction. The decision belongs to the county. Now, how are these related? Sharon, you brought this Quarry story to the table here today. This is in your backyard. What's happening there, and what does it tell us about who has power over these decisions?
Well, first of all, what's happening up here is a lot of community action. I learned about this at the beginning of April, and there are regular meetings. I've been to one of the meetings. I've been to one of the early meetings, came out against this. And it is so not only is it in Eagle Marsh, it is within yards of a brand new IU hospital that is going in, and yards of an elementary school. It is, and the elementary schools existed for a significant amount of time, so they know it's there. And the problem with this is it's actually going to impact people up to, I think it's 5 miles away. They're going to be able to feel vibrations from the quarry. They're going to be able to hear noise from the quarry, so on and so forth. But going back to your question about who has power, it has been really interesting to watch our city official, our entire city council has come out against it, which is really interesting. Our mayor has come out against it. And then, there's a number of us who are running for legislation that have come out against it. And it's been really interesting because we haven't heard anything from, I believe, the current county council, who would be making the decisions specifically about zoning. And it's currently a farm. It's currently farmland. And so the entire thing would have to be rezoned in order for this to work out. Normally companies like this, when they're proposing a quarry, they make sure that it's not near existing infrastructure, existing homes. This would impact, I think, over 6,000 different homes. And they aren't being very careful with the decision that they are making here. There's a big hearing at the end of May where the conversation will actually kind of go further. But it's just been really interesting to watch it from the inside and see the conversations that are taking place. Well, I don't really have jurisdiction over that, but at least coming out against it. Like, people kind of questioned why I was coming out against it. It's at the opposite of the county for me. And I'm like, because I want to show that I have stood against this prior if it ever does come up in my area of the county. And I think it also goes to questions about development in general.
Yeah, and look, old technology like a quarry, like digging rocks out of the ground, new technology like AI data centers, it's the same thing. Business interests controlling the folks who make the decisions. Even though, you'll find a lot of folks voicing opposition to it in elected office, they always seem to find a way to get these things done. Fred, you're in Indianapolis. Now this seems to be ground zero in the data center fight. Mm-hmm. Companies seem to be targeting just about every area in the city. What about your neighborhood?
Thankfully, nothing has come in my neighborhood right now, but I am, a 15-20 minute bike ride away from where this Metro Blocks data center would be going in. I've driven by that place pretty frequently. I think my biggest issue, to be honest, like having worked in tech so I started my career, at Apple. I worked in, Apple retail and training and, all of those things right after the first iPhone came out. It was a very cool time to be working at Apple. Made my way to different tech companies, a couple of startups, ending up being bought by SAP, a big, international, global, I think Germany-based company that does big data. I've seen the way that a lot of these companies operate internally, the disregard for people's safety, the disregard for laws, because from the top down, there isn't really a value in following these rules. There's a value in making more money and getting the next sale, even if you have to lie to get the next sale. I was also on the implementation side. So whenever they would sell something like a data center or, a software or whatever, I would be the one to actually solve the problem of getting it implemented and those kinds of things. And I can tell you the people who are selling this to us are not the ones who actually know how it works. They're taking a press thing from their lawyers, from a technical guy, and whittling it down and saying, well, technically this or technically that. Like, at the end of the day, this AI boom is a theft game. They have stolen people's data. They have scraped things off the web. They have accessed stuff that was not intended to be accessed and then monetized without consent or permission. In a similar way that we, dig into the ground below each of our feet, the land that our families, our ancestors have plowed and planted and, built our families on, like, we should have some stake in the game, whether we get a decision, we can say, hey, I don't want this, or I do want this. And the people in that community can say that. And if maybe we decide as a society that we do need another quarry or we do need a data center, well, why is that not being returned to the people who are actually negatively impacted by it? Mm-hmm. We see this in Alaska. Alaska has a, dividend from the oil companies that are in Alaska. Mm-hmm. That has created a, maybe not a universal basic income in the sense of you could survive only on that money, but it has created a ground of safety for the people of Alaska that makes it better to live in Alaska than in a lot of other states. And that's saying a lot because Alaska sucks. It is so cold and so dark. And to see that we are in this moment of time where the same ideas, the same concepts have continued. When we had slavery, it was how do we take people from another country and put them to work for our money. When we got rid of slavery, we had sharecropping. When we got rid of sharecropping, we had factories. And, we continue down this road of creating more and more unequal systems instead of accepting the reality that, like, AI is built on all of our work, all of our ancestors' work, the people that we love, the people we care about, your Reddit comment about something. And I think that you should get paid for that. And that's... And these things could be used to benefit us all. It doesn't have to be the way it is. These are policy decisions, and the people making the policy are bought by the people who benefit from our current unequal system. Let's move on. Let's turn. We got coming into the home stretch here, and hey, we got an election coming up on Tuesday. Right now,
But I want to start with a race that will take place next year, actually, and that's the one for mayor of Indianapolis. Joe Hogsett this week said he won't rule out a fourth term, despite explicitly promising a third and final term in 2022 and having called for 2 term limits during his 2015 campaign. His list of unfinished business is longer than his list of finished business. The old City Hall deal collapsed. City Market is delayed until at least 2028. The MLS stadium stalled. The downtown heliport redevelopment is going nowhere. Meanwhile, his time in office has been tainted by scandal, a toxic office culture rife with sexual harassment, his former chief of staff cashing in on millions in city incentives overseen by a city official he was romantically involved with, allegations of substance abuse. Still, Hogsett ended 2025 with $1.2 million in the bank, not exactly the war chest of someone who's definitely done. Also, on the corrupt Marion County Democratic establishment beat, sheriff's candidate Kelvis Williams sent out a mailer this week falsely implying 6 prominent Democrats, including party chair Mila Eldridge and county clerk Kate Sweeney Bell, formed an official Democratic team endorsing him. Now, they say none of them had agreed to be on it. Right. The Marion County Democratic Party officially dropped slating in 2023 precisely to get away from this kind of old guard machine politics, but some things never change. Fred, you're there in Indianapolis. What do you think of a fourth term for Mayor Joe?
I just got this in the mail. It's like poorly AI made. This is from Kate Sweeney Bell. I posted a video of this and I accidentally doxed myself, so I deleted it. Just complaining about so much of this, like the way that we are like running Indianapolis as a city is just overall stupid. Like I've listened to a lot of interviews with Hogsett. I've talked to people who are in the city. You know, I've been pretty involved in like different campaigns and what's happening here. Like the idea that we need to have more cranes in the sky to build more hotels so that we can have more people coming to downtown for conventions is the whole logic of Mayor Hogsett's institution that he is running. And it is one of the dumbest ideas. Like he talks about, we will have more capacity than New York City for conventions. And I'm like, well, because who gives a shit about conventions? Sorry, am I allowed to cuss on this?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. Who cares about conventions? But it really like it misunderstands what is happening in our community, that like we want, just like I said, like we want to be more self-determined. We want to have more power over what happens to our neighbors. We want the wealth of downtown to spread throughout the whole community. And when you go downtown, like half of it is vacant. It looks bad. It's sad. Like I don't know why we spend so much of our time focusing on what is, I don't know, like what is the bad stigma of Indianapolis and the crime and all of this stuff. And no one is really solving that problem. And it feels like we just get more of this kind of poor rhetoric, AI art type stuff rather than real solutions to problems. I'm not trying to plug in. Yeah, I'm not trying to plug any mayoral candidates for the next election, but I can tell you I'm very excited for a new mayor.
Andrea Hunley, if you're listening, on the show. That's all I'm saying. Sharon, I'm going to throw this next one to you. But we're going to use an Indianapolis angle into this thing. Greg Ballard, who led the city as a Republican previously, is now running for Secretary of State as an independent. This week, Ballard called for the 2 major parties to pay for their own primaries, pointing out that taxpayers spent $13.3 million running the 2024 primaries for parties that restrict who can even participate in them. The current system requires candidates who have voted in their party's last 2 primaries to get county chair approval. Ballard calls it broken and inaccessible to everyday Hoosiers. He is still collecting the 37,000 voter signatures needed just to get on the November ballot, a barrier that itself illustrates his point about the system favoring the 2 major parties. But Sharon, Indiana Democrats can barely afford to put on their own state convention, let alone pay for statewide primaries. What does a real solution to this look like?
That is a great question. And I do kind of the current system, I do agree, is broken. We saw that in Indianapolis. We saw that in Marion County when a number of people who were selected as delegates or who put their name to be on as delegates were then ultimately rejected I think it ended up being over 100 folks. I
think it was 80 the last time I saw.
80. Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if it has climbed because the headline was like 80 in a day, and I would not be surprised if more got cut.
But the fact that, we do have this rule where like some county chairs go ahead and they fill out the certification. Some county chairs don't. That just shows that there's a clear break in the system. Mm-hmm. And, one of the individuals, I'm actually in the Emerging Leaders Project right now. One of the individuals I believe that was ultimately rejected is in the program with me and is like actually doing things in Indianapolis. I'm not going to say what that individual is doing because then that will highlight who they are. But there were people who couldn't vote in elections because they weren't 18 years old yet. And so therefore they didn't have the ability to do so, who wanted to be delegates. And it is hard to get people to go on ballots for anything. So the fact that we then turned around and rejected a significant number of people who wanted to go down to the state house or wanted to go down to the convention and participate in democracy, like that's going to be something that those people remember and will probably talk to other people about and be like, do you really want to take part in democracy if this is what's going to happen? But then sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Oh, no, you're good.
Yeah. But the fact that, we struggle to put on our own events as well. It comes down to how, not to mention so much of politics is pay to play anyway. Any event that you get invited to, you then turn around and find out you have to pay for a ticket for. It does bring down to, how do we get money out of politics? There, I guess I said it. How do we get money out of politics? Yeah,
100%. So I guess couple more election-related stories I want to talk about before we have to turn the page. Like we said, Election Day is Tuesday. One of the big things we'll be watching with our coverage here are the contentious Republican state Senate races where President Trump and his allies have invested heavily to unseat incumbents who voted against his redistricting scheme last year. This war isn't necessarily about them. It's about unseating Senate President Pro Tem Rod Bray, who doesn't face election until 2028, but does control the caucus leadership vote. A pledge to vote against Bray for Pro Tem was a Trump endorsement litmus test. Apparently, one Republican candidate called it unethical because you're already asking me to sell a vote before I've even been elected. Pro-redistricting groups have spent $5 million in state legislative races. Bray has countered with $3.5 million of his own. Now, on the Democratic side, a primary we've been watching is in suburban Indianapolis District 31, a four-way race in which one of the candidates is outgoing Marion County Sheriff Kerry Forrestal. One of the candidates in that contest, Andrew Desolon, was arrested last Sunday night in Fishers after police found cocaine in his car after he had been reported for soliciting while canvassing a neighborhood. He tried to drive away when asked for ID, resisted handcuffing multiple times, and was booked in Hamilton County Jail just days before the primary he's running in. Desolon is a former 11-year policy director for the Indiana Senate Democratic Caucus who had made marijuana legalization a campaign priority. He posted on Instagram shortly before his arrest, quote, "Got a bag of new tricks with me for this last stretch." Sharon, you're running for office. You're probably doing a lot of canvassing yourself. It must be exhausting. You ever need a little pick-me-up?
I'm getting my pick-me-ups through caffeine and making sure that I'm getting enough sleep. I read this and I was like, well, that is an approach. It's not the approach that I would have gone with, but it is an approach. And I think that it almost feels like an indictment on just the way that people actually maybe view themselves as Democrats, or at the very least view Democrats who are running for office. Like it makes the rest of us look bad when this type of thing happens. But also it's like, are we really taking ourselves that unseriously if this is something that people feel like they can go out and do.
Yeah, I don't know. I've always thought Blow was Republican coded. Fred, on the other side of the aisle, the Republican infighting, spending large sums of money against each other, you love to see it, don't you?
Yeah, we do love to see it. We love the drama. It's honestly kind of better than reality TV show. I've been watching Traitors recently for the first time.
Yeah.
We're like season 3. I'm like, oh my God, can we just do this with the Republican Party? Put them all in a house together and make them fight. When you said cocaine, it just made me think of JJ Cale's song Cocaine. You know, if you want to, what is it? If you want to hang out, you got to take her out. Cocaine. I think he took that a little too literally, unfortunately. I mean, the hard thing is, like, it is really hard to run it's hard to run a campaign. It's hard to do anything independently in this state, and especially running opposition is very, very tough. And typically people find the support that they need from like a healthy diet, probably from Adderall. I would guess there's probably a lot of people here who got diagnosed for ADHD at some point who are running for Congress, House, whatever. There are a lot of other better drugs than illegal, illicit drugs to keep you going on the campaign trail. I personally think a lot of it just shows that, like, you have a lot of people who are carrying their own campaign, who are doing this alone, who are doing this without support, who are trying to turn to other resources to do it. And as much as it would be, I would probably be laughing a lot more if it was a Republican who got caught with it than it was a Democrat. But drugs are just a real thing across the aisle. People do drugs. It is something that humans have been doing since the beginning of time. You know, we smoke cigarettes to get by. You're not going to get arrested for having a cigarette in your car. You will get arrested for cocaine. Choose better alternatives if you need that little pick-me-up. Another cup of coffee will also solve your problem. Maybe 2 of them, you'll get the same high as you get from cocaine. Monster, Balls energy drink, which was always a favorite of mine. There are other alternatives. I think for me, it says a lot more to, like, we need more support in the parties. We need more support from people. You shouldn't feel like you need to do drugs to be able to be on the campaign trail. That's I guess
drugs are bad. Okay. Let's cover this one really quick before we get to our last story. So we don't normally cover the weather here, but this story is about more than just the weather. 3 tornadoes touched down in Indiana Monday, 2 in Morgan County, 1 near Seymour in Jackson County, destroying barns, downing 39 utility poles, and damaging homes. No injuries reported, fortunately. But here's the number that should stick with you. Indiana has now had at least 14 confirmed tornadoes so far in 2026. Wow. The annual average is 22. We're not even halfway through the year, and the past 3 years have each ranked in the top 5 for tornadoes in Indiana history. I don't know, Fred, it's like the climate is changing.
My grandpa's lived in the same place. He was born, raised, still lives in the same house in southern Indiana. My great grandpa and probably a bunch of other dudes built it. And he is telling me about how weird the climate is. Yep. Trees are a little bit different than they used to be when I was a kid. All right, Papa. I wonder why that is. What's going on? I mean, we are all noticing it. We're all seeing it. We all are aware of it. It's just, what do we attribute it to, and what do we do to solve the problem? I think we have a lot of hopefulness in the Democratic Party that we can solve the problem, or at least mitigate the effects of it by enacting better laws, by, funding the things that we need to fund. Rather than funding more wars in Iran, we could fund, better windmills, solar. We can fund all kinds of other things. I think to me, it sucks that we are in the middle of this, but I think Indiana is placed, at least from the climate models I see into 2050, in a very safe spot. And I think that we will see more and more climate refugees coming to our state. We will see more of a need to replace the breadbasket that is being grown in places like Kansas. A lot more of the Great Plains state. I think Indiana will start to see a need to do that. As long as we don't get rid of all of our water by boiling it for data centers, we might still have some water in the future.
Yeah. Sharon, is climate change and its urgency and immediacy actually beginning to register with average Hoosers, do you think?
I sure hope so. So I'm a weather nerd. I have loved studying the weather since I was in 7th grade, and it almost goes back to the fact that they defunded the National Weather Service and all of that a year ago. Like this, it's just making us less safe. And this also goes back to, is the cruelty the point? Like we keep saying that, but people used to be able to feel safer. Like we used to get more alerts for, I mean, it wasn't too bad on Monday. We had a little bit of notice, but it just feel like I can feel in my weather watching how we don't have a lot of the service that we had a couple of years ago. There are parts of there. I was in the middle of it wasn't the storm Monday. It might've been one a couple of weeks ago. And I was looking at my radar and it was green, and it was definitely not acting green outside. It was definitely like more intense. And the thing is, we also have to recognize that what's going on around the world, including bombing other parts of the world, like does impact our weather. It does impact our climate. And so it goes back to, it's all connected.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of things that are connected, let's move to our final story this week. And I almost let this one go as kind of a fun end of show story. But honestly, like, how do you not love a federal gambling takedown called Operation Porterhouse Parlay? The FBI, IRS, and the CBP raided 2 Northwest Indiana restaurants, Gino's Steakhouse in Maryville and Paragon Restaurant in Hobart, plus a Cherville home on Wednesday, arresting 22 people across 7 states. The alleged ringleaders, Jimmy the Greek Gerodamos, Dean Gialmas, and Chris Gerodamos, allegedly ran online betting sites, phone and text wagering, lines of credit, and a ring of collectors who tracked down and physically threatened people who didn't pay from at least 2021 through this week. The defendants range in age from 21 to over 80. Now, 3 weeks before the raids, an undercover FBI agent leaving a meeting with Jimmy the Greek was tailed by alleged enforcer Michael Campbell, known to his friends as Michael Way Out or Chucky Hoffa. Campbell crossed 3 lanes of US 30 at the last second, hit I-65, drove over 100 miles an hour, weaved through traffic, illegally activated emergency amber lights on his union-registered truck, and stayed in constant phone contact with Gerodamos for over an hour all the way to the Lafayette area. Look, crazy shit, right? But then you start pulling at some of these threads, and one of the indicted defendants has deep tied to Laborers International Local 81, the same union whose truck Campbell was driving, and the same local whose current business manager is Corey Campbell. He is the brother of the indicted 100-mile-hour driving enforcer Chucky Hoffa himself. Now, Corey is also an appointed deputy party chair for labor relations of the Indiana State Democratic Party, appointed by Chair Karen Talion. And also, Local 81 donated $5,000 to a Lake County Sheriff's candidate. A previously Lake County Sheriff before the current one, John Bunsich, had been sentenced to 15 years and 8 months for bribery, was also allegedly paid to look the other way by this network. Sitting in the middle of all of this is Lake County in the middle of all these Lake County Democratic threads is Congressman Frank Mrvan, who we mentioned earlier in the show, the same one who voted to give this administration warrantless surveillance authority. The Campbell boys are pictured on the Capitol steps with Mrvan. The tentacles in this thing are deep. We're going to be keeping an eye on it. Sharon, quick thoughts before we got to turn this thing over.
I had thoughts before we started the show about this. Like my first gut reaction was, so we have mafia dealing in Indiana in 2026. Like that was because that's essentially what this comes down to, is it's a mafia or what feels like an old school Las Vegas mafia in Indiana, which is just interesting. It's also really interesting because we are talking about the move of the casino from southern Indiana up to northern Indiana, up to Allen County or DeKalb County, Steuben County. And it's clear that there are gambling ties in Northwest Indiana that have caused problems in Northwest Indiana. So then that begs the question of, and a lot of the people that I'm running with do not want a casino up in our area. And this makes me give a lot more pause to the concept of having gambling so close to home.
Well, theoretically, having legalized gambling establishments is supposed to prevent this sort of thing. Fred, I'm having a hard time making the navigating through the connections with the union and the Democratic Party, and organized crime and organized labor have a history together. I thought we had largely gotten past that sort of thing, but I'll tell you what, man, as a guy who supports unions, who supports organized labor, this sort of crap really gets my goat, because it makes the entire movement look bad.
Yeah, I think it's that a absolute power corrupts absolutely concept coming back to really roost in any of these cases. One, I think gambling is on the rise because people don't feel like they have a legitimate path to success and to stability in life. The middle class has been hollowed out. I mean, if you look at inflation, you compare to what my parents were making, even working without a with only a high school degree. Compared to what I was even making working with a, college degree in tech, there isn't that much of a difference. There's a pretty, this has become the path to a middle class life. And I think whenever you don't feel like there's a stable way to survive, to make money, you turn to, gambling, you turn to luck, you turn to risk, you turn to crime. And unfortunately, it's not the people. It's the people who are running these organizations who end up, leading this crime and leading these types of gambling. But this is spilled out into prediction markets. I mean, we are seeing so many young men right now who are going to be in debt till the day they die because of stupid predictions and things, gambling and free money that is being given out. Free. I say free money. I don't really mean free money. I mean what they perceive as free money. I think that this is a symptom of the economic reality that we are in, that the people who do have power in that community realize that they have a lot of people who need help and support, who want to find a quick way to get some cash, who are working their ass off, who, will probably die in their 50s and 60s before they retire because they've worked so hard. We are seeing that those people, they want to find a way to have a stable life. And if gambling is the solution in their head, they're going to turn to it. It makes me mad that it's the Democratic establishment, but there are bad people everywhere. And whenever all we have is a couple different parties, there are going to be bad people in each of these parties doing things to harm the community. And there are going to be good people who are fighting back against it. And I guess for me, it's at the end of the day, if somebody wants to make a movie about this in Hollywood, I hope they call me to direct it. I would love to be the director for a gambling ring movie about Indiana.
This thing, we're going to be keeping an eye on this. I suspect these tentacles run deep. We're going to find a lot more about this as the months go on. But for right now, let's wrap this thing up. Sharon, we are just a couple days out from the election. How can folks still help the campaign?
So please go out and vote. That is one of the biggest ways that you can help. Historically, here in Allen County, we have had about between 13 and 18% of eligible voters show up in a primary in a presidential year. Please go out and vote. At the very least, that tells us, if more people are voting, that shows other people that it is, that there are people that agree with them once those voting numbers come out. Obviously, please look me up at www.electsharonwhite.com or www.facebook.com/electsharonwhite. That last name is WIGHT. You can see things that I'm posting. You can also see the parts of my platform that are important to me. And you can find a place to, as always, as much as I hate money in politics, you can donate, so that way it can help get me over the finish line. And hopefully, moving on, because I am opposed. Hopefully, get me to November.
Fred, take a few seconds to shamelessly promote yourself.
I've got a karaoke show happening on Tuesday. If you're in Indianapolis and Broad Ripple, we're playing at Half Liter. It's live band karaoke, which is really fun. Me and a drummer, we can pull up any song that you want. So you can do whatever you want, from, 70s and 80s classics to recent hip hop songs, if you'd like. And we play along with you. So it's really fun. I just released a song last week. It came out on Tuesday. It's called Spitting Up Blood. It's about romance and relationships. As funny as that is, it's a summer bop, kind of groovy, jammy type vibes. Give me a listen. I'm meeting with Jackson Franklin later today to talk about what's happening in Gaza. So I'll be posting that early this week, probably either tonight or tomorrow. I'm always trying to do something. Follow me on the internet at MFFred, my friend Fred, more fries Fred, motherfucking Fred. If you want, you can say whatever you like. I always save it for the end. But I think for me, it's like, yeah, I'm just excited. I think Indiana has a lot of potential. I was very inspired in 2019. I drove from Amsterdam to Paris. I met some people whenever I was there. And they were like, hey, our bus, because of strikes, they were striking. They weren't able to get on a train or a bus or whatever to get to Paris. So I rented a car and drove. And I remember looking out over the just grass and cornfields and trees and being really inspired to be like, this is Indiana. There is no difference between France and Indiana. The only difference is a rich history of people staying in that community and investing in the community. And so as much as I would love to move to another place, and I think that music and art would probably do better outside of Indianapolis, and sometimes does. I really love it here. And so I'm just excited to be here. If you don't like it here, come to a show, come hang out, talk to me. I'll listen to you or talk at you. I don't know. It depends on the day. But yeah, that's what I'm up to.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, folks, you can find me, of course, on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM with feedback. I'm back tonight at 7 p.m. for the final Progressive Indiana Network virtual town hall of this primary season with 9th District Congressional candidate Dr. Tim Peck. He'll take your questions directly in the live chat. Then Tuesday, beginning at 7 Eastern, 6 Central, join me, Brianna Newhart, Carly Dunn, Derek Holder, and Kelly DeLong for Progressive Indiana Network's election night special. I think Tracy Carson is going to join us. We'll have results and analysis for all the key races, and we hope to hear from candidates like Sharon all across the state, and we hope to see you there in the chat. We can't do all this without you. Please support our work with a paid subscription at progressiveindiana.net and follow us on social media at the full spelled out name, Progressive Indiana Network, on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it's PIN Indiana. Help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Follow, and again, follow, like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. Once again, thank you to Sharon White and Fred Miller for joining us today. Donate and volunteer for the candidates. Like, share, and comment, and leave a review for us. Let's keep building a radically democratic Indiana together. Until next time.
Can I say one last thing before you close?
Yes.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is fantastic. This is like such a nice place for me to go as a person who feels a little alone in like the progressive space in Indiana. I want to give you your flowers. I know you're always thanking people at the end of the show, but thank you for putting this on.
Aw, thanks, Fred.
Anytime.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching us. Again, join me tonight with Tim Peck, 7 o'clock. And please tune in for the election special on Tuesday night. I will put our coverage against any media outlet in the state. But until then, until next time, I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.